to the honourable gentleman.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Can I ask him, does he think, are there any limits to freedom of speech then? And would there come a point where someone like Donald Trump should be banned because the words that he said are just so extreme? Because many of us on this side feel that already he is inciting hatred against the Muslim community, both in this country and across the world.
Well, I don't accept the honourable gentleman's analysis, but yes, there do need to be some restrictions on free speech, and they are if people are inciting violence or terrorism, then that free speech should be restricted and is unacceptable. But we certainly should not go around banning everyone from the country simply for voicing an opinion that the honourable gentleman happens to disagree with. I'll give way to my honourable friend.
Honourable gentleman for giving way. Sir David, I don't know if I'm sure the honourable gentleman would agree that this motion is actually embarrassing to the UK and makes us look intolerant and totalitarian. And I feel we should almost apologise to the people of the United States. It's for them to decide on Mr. Trump's views, not us. And I think we should also remind people in America that these people over here represent less than 1% of the population of this country.
Well, I share the sentiment behind my honourable friend's contribution. I think it is ridiculous, frankly, that we are needing to have such a debate in a country that has always prided itself on freedom and free speech. And no, I won't, because other people need to speak. I'm afraid there isn't time. The real issue for me, the honourable lady had her say, the real issue for me is not actually Donald Trump's remarks, but it's actually the reaction to them. He's not a serious threat of harm to our society in any way. The uproar is largely because he's rich, white and politically incorrect. And that, to me, is really the crux of the issue. The debate today is actually as much to do with political correctness as it is to do with his comments. The political correctness that attacks free speech. The free speech which, quite rightly, Americans hold very dear, as indeed do many of us here in this country. And the irony is, it's that in part because of political correctness, that the straight talking of Donald Trump has proved so popular with the electorate over there. People are fed up of being told what they can and can't think, what they can and can't say, and they find it refreshing, even whether they agree with him or disagree with him. They find it refreshing to find a politician who has the guts to stand up and says what he thinks, even if it's controversial and even when it's unpopular. And so, David, in many cases, we should celebrate more often politicians who stand up and say things that are unpopular and things that are controversial. It's easy for anybody to stand up and trot out some motherhood and apple pie and something that's popular. Any old fool can trot out all of that stuff. But it takes real guts to say things unpopular and controversial. And in that regard, I have a lot of respect for the leader of the opposition, who makes a hallmark of saying unpopular things and controversial things. And I will always defend his right to do that too. There are many people who are tolerated in this country because of what we believe in free speech. People who I think will be placed higher up the barred list by many of my constituents than Donald Trump. Those who preach their hatred of all things British from our own soil. Those who denounce freedom generally and hate the Western way of protecting our very important individual freedoms and values. The silencing of opinion that we've seen in both countries only builds up a resentment that otherwise would never exist. There are people in this country who stand up for the rights of foreign criminals who we seek to deport from this country and are unable to do so because of human rights laws. Many of the people who are so keen to ban Donald Trump for entering the country are exactly the same people who are so keen to keep foreign criminals in this country who we're trying to deport from the country. And we're debating whether or not Donald Trump should be banned. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely outrageous. And I end, Sir David, on the point I made at the start, that for anybody to think that they're so outraged that Donald Trump thinks that people should be banned from his country because of their beliefs, can think that the solution to that problem is to ban Donald Trump for his beliefs is absolutely ridiculous. You couldn't make it up, and I couldn't agree less than that if I tried.
Mr. Gavin Newlands.
Sir David, it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'd like to say it's a pleasure to follow the honourable member for Shipley, but instead I'll congratulate the over 600,000 petitioners who have combined unintentionally to bring this debate to Parliament. And I'd like to pay tribute to previous speeches made by honourable colleagues and to the honourable member for Newport West, who led the debate in his own inimitable and, on this occasion, balanced manner. It horrifies me to think that in the 21st century, we're still dealing with issues of racism, sexism, bigotry, and any other form of prejudice that Donald J. Trump can squeeze into his campaign. Let's be clear, Donald Trump is an idiot. I've tried to find different, perhaps more parliamentary adjectives to describe Trump, but none were really clear enough. He's an idiot. The fact that such a person can get so deep into the selection battle to be the Republican Party candidate for President of the United States, the most powerful job in the world, speaks volumes about how far the once mighty GOP of Lincoln and Roosevelt has fallen. The petitioners have asked us to consider banning or otherwise a possible presidential candidate from entering the UK. The question we should be asking ourselves is, should Trump be treated differently from anyone else because of who he is, how rich he is, how powerful he may become, or what business interests he may have in the UK? Our immigration rules have to cover everyone, regardless of how powerful they are or what religion they believe in. If we are to ban extremists, then we should consider banning Christian extremists in the same way and to the same extent that we consider banning Muslim extremists from travelling to the UK. Each and every day, young people are being held back and bullied on the basis of gender, the colour of their skin, the creed of their school, their sexuality, or a disability. And each and every day, a family live in fear because they've had the audacity to flee a war-torn country. The people who are victims of these hateful and poisonous acts look to authority figures and lawmakers to help solve this issue and protect them in the future. However, today's debate asks us to contemplate the likely situation that a bigot and downright bully will be elected to the position of President of the United States. If Trump is able to stand on Capitol Hill next January and deliver the oath of office, it will send a message to bigots, racists and sexists the world over. It will say to the bullies that your behaviour is okay, that bigotry is not only okay but commendable, and it's okay to hate people who may look, speak or act differently from you. The question before us today is how we as a united Parliament defeat the hateful politics of Donald Trump and others like him. I am in two minds about this particular issue. I want to challenge Trump head-on, showing him how ridiculous his views are and defeating his poison by highlighting the contribution that everyone, no matter the background, makes to society. However, I also want us to treat Mr Trump in the same way we treat everyone else who has been banned from the UK. The arguments for banning Trump are based on the principle that we ban other hateful preachers and extremists from the UK, and therefore why shouldn't we add Trump to that undesirable list? It is unclear how many individuals the UK government have banned from visiting the UK. However, in 2014, the Home Secretary indicated that she had excluded hundreds of people from gaining entry in the UK. Therefore, on what grounds would it be acceptable to ban these people but not also ban Mr Trump, who, in the Prime Minister's own words, has also used language that is divisive, stupid and wrong? The Home Secretary and her officials are able to refuse entry to the UK for reasons related to a person's character, conduct, associations, or if their presence would not be conducive to the public good. A list of unacceptable behaviours was published in 2005, which included using means or medium which foster hatred, which might lead to inter-community violence. Mr Chairman, on that basis, in order to ensure that we are operating in a consistent manner, then I see no reason why Trump should be allowed a visa to visit the UK. His racist, bigoted and sexist views are dangerous and divisive. He doesn't believe that women are equal to men, although in reality, he doesn't believe that women are equal to men, although in reality I think he believes that no one is quite equal to the Donald. And I do have sympathy with the view that because he wants to ban Muslims from entering the United States, that we should ban him from the UK. I agree with a lot of the arguments put forward by those who would ban him. However, I want to tackle the poisonous views and policies that Trump believes in head-on. The way that we defeat people like Trump is by showing him how outrageous his views in the world are. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Invitations should be extended to Trump to visit a local mosque, to meet with ordinary Muslims to discuss their beliefs, to meet refugee families fleeing bloody war to hear their stories, to meet feminist and LGBTI groups to debate equality, to homeless shelters, and so on and so on. Let him debate all of these issues and he will soon be found out for what he is, an idiot. Trump's rhetoric is not dissimilar to that spouted by Nick Griffin and the BNP, and where is he now? We cannot and should not be afraid to tackle the views held by Trump and others like him. To do so would mean that they will be able to try and convert others to their cause without being fully challenged. The fight against racism, bigotry, sexism, in fact, prejudice in general is not over. We've got a long way to go to ensure we see equality and fairness throughout the world. We cannot allow bullies like Trump to think he can continue to offend people based on how they look, who they love, or who they believe in. We should send out a message saying no to Trump and his bigoted politics, but we should do so through the power of argument. By no means should we roll out the red carpet, but let Trump come to the UK and have that debate. He will soon wish he had been banned.
Kwasi Kwarteng.
Thank you, sir. David. I'm very grateful to be called at this late stage in the debate. I think it's been an interesting debate, lots of very sincerely held views. Now, as a matter of fact, it is Martin Luther King Day, and I think if Martin Luther King were here today, he'd be very surprised at some of the sugar-coated version of American history that has been on display today. I hate to say it, I regret to say this, but what Trump has proposed has been proposed many times in American legislation. The outright ban of people on the basis of race or color or ethnicity is something which, regrettably, has often happened in United States history. You only need to look at the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which was on the statute for 61 years, in which Chinese laborers were banned from entering the United States. The Immigration Act of 1924 similarly banned Arabs and Asians and was only changed in 1952. So Martin Luther King would be very surprised at the very, one might say politically correct, although I don't want to use that term, but the very sanitized version of American history and politics that we've heard today. And in that light, Donald J. Trump's objectionable, hateful views have a history in the American political arena. They're not unusual, they're not something that he dreamt out from his own head. They come in a long line of nativist legislation. Now, we can object to this, we can decry this, we can say it's terrible and evil and bad, but that is no grounds on which to ban a presidential candidate. He would even say, he would suggest that his ban was a temporary ban. That's what he said in his speech in South Carolina. You will note that the Chinese Exclusion Act was not a temporary ban. It lasted for 60 years. The Immigration Acts of 1924 were not a temporary ban on Asians and Arabs. They lasted for 30 years. So his form of nativism is something which I'm afraid to say, and Martin Luther King would, I'm sure, agree with me, is something which the history of the United States, regrettably, is full of. And so Donald Trump is in a long tradition, but that doesn't mean we should ban him. And all the arguments that have been made against the ban, I think, are absolutely valid. And I will say this, no one has said it, but I will say it in this debate. If the United Kingdom were to ban Donald J. Trump from coming into Britain, that would be the biggest boost for his campaign in America that we could possibly give. Absolutely. In terms of publicity, in terms of the patriotism of the United States, not wishing other countries to impose upon them to try and shape and determine the outcome of their elections. This would be a spectacular own goal. I remember the Guardian attempt in 2004 to stop George Bush from becoming re-elected, from being re-elected in that campaign. And I think a very misguided Guardian journalist, and I mean no slur on that paper, but they had a writing campaign, a letter campaign to the people in Ohio. They'd identified that Ohio was a key swing state, and they got some of their readers to write to individual electors in that state, urging them not to vote for George W. Bush. Needless to say, I'm sure members of the House will not be surprised to learn that George W. Bush carried Ohio and was indeed re-elected as President of the United States. That campaign was often cited as a way in which foreigners, people trying to intervene in the election of another state, could get things completely wrong. And the same thing I'm very happy to give way.